Hi, this is Sabrina Sherman. I'm with my paternal grandmother, Claire Sherman, and she's going to tell us a little bit about what she remembers from Pearl Harbor while she was a child in Canada. So, see, you were still in Canada at that point, yes?
Correct.
And
I
when
was
were you
10,
when were you born?
1931, so I was 10 years old in
January
1941.
31st.
Yes, right.
And so, what do you remember from what did you hear about it? What was it like to learn about it?
Well, I remembered exactly when it happened because Canada and Great Britain had been at war with Germany since 1939. And it was early in the morning in Manitoba, where I lived, when Pearl Harbor occurred. And I still recall my father being very excited about the situation, not happy about Pearl Harbor, but happy that it would bring the United States in on the side of Great Britain and Canada in fighting the war. So
And how did you hear about it?
on the radio,
Early in the morning or was it later in the
no, it
day?
was early in the morning.
Did your parents wake you up to hear it or
No, I don't remember that particularly. I just remember waking up and hearing my dad talking about the fact that now the United States would have to enter the war.
were you happy at that?
Well, as a 10-year-old, it didn't affect me as much. I guess I was happy that my dad felt good about it.
So, do you remember so you don't remember too much about hearing about the actual bombing of Pearl Harbor?
Well, yeah, we heard the President Roosevelt speech and all the information on the radio. It was
Was
all
it was it common to hear Roosevelt speaking in Canada or just when it
oh
was
yes, no, his speeches were recorded and played in Canada as well.
um when did you come to America?
After World War II, it was in September 1945.
And being in Canada during the war, was there any threat of being attacked yourself or
No, none at all.
so pretty much it was just like you were an outsider watching the war as a child?
Well, yes, but after a while, there was no concern of the United States being attacked either. That ceased to be a concern after Pearl Harbor.
Were you scared at all or
No, no, but I was very interested. I kept very careful track of all the battles. I remember particularly the European battles. I would clip out the maps in the newspaper every day where they would show progress. Well, at the time, they were showing progress, and I stapled them all around my room. I had a I could follow the war.
that's kind of cool. So, what was it like when you heard the war was over?
Oh, everybody was so happy.
And
We had friends. My parents had friends who had one son drowned, and um, when they were trying to land in Italy, and several of the people in our little community were in the service.
was
And my father was, and my mother were in charge of the sale of victory bonds, they were called, to raise money to fight the war.
so that was their contribution to the war.
Yes, well, they were in their 40s at the time.
Did your mother or father pick up an extra job to support? Did your mother work in the factories or anything?
No, we lived in a small town. My father was a country doctor, and my mother was a homemaker. But they did work on the bond program, and we had I think they were called WACs, the army, the women in the army, who would go around to give speeches to raise funds, and they would stay with us when they came to our little town.
Do you still have the maps of the progress?
I have a scrapbook, and I think they're in there, but I'd have to look. If I do, I'll give them to you.
Okay, that'd be really cool.
Yeah, I
Um,
think I can.
is there anything else that really stands out to you that you remember about it?
No, but I remember when before we moved to the United States, I remember memorizing uh, the Star Spangled Banner and the Pledge of Allegiance, so I would be ready to participate.
And so I know you were I know you're a victim of McCarthyism after you moved here, but other than that, were you directly impacted by the war at all or anything?
No, I remember a friend of ours, someone that we lived nearby in Los Angeles, they had a relative who'd been in a concentration camp. He was only about 18, and he came to stay with them for a while. And I remember him telling me that when the guard would throw away the core of an apple, umpteen people would rush over to pick it up so they'd have something to eat. Never forgot that.
And what were your feelings of the Japanese at that time, or did you have any?
Well, they did some very cruel things, like the Bataan Death March, and we would hear about that and see about it in the movies. So I had a very strong dislike.
Did you blame the Japanese, or did you blame it that it was a fact of war?
No, I blamed the Japanese. I thought they were very cruel.
Do you still have any feelings against them?
No. As the saying goes, I've got lots of friends who are Japanese.
How long did it take to get rid of those feelings?
I don't know. They're just gone. I don't think I carried them on after
The war.
Once they were out of the position to hurt anybody, and they were properly,
Punished.
They were tried and convicted and so forth. I don't think I've thought about that anymore.
Grandpa said that he hated the Germans more than the Japanese.
Yeah, that surprised me. I heard him say that too.
What about you?
Well, I hated them both for the awful things that they did. I truly hated.
Do you forgive them both?
Well, the people themselves, sure, because that, it's the people who ran the.
So I know you're not going to forgive Hitler, but would you forgive the Japanese generals at all? Seeing as they were.
Yeah, I don't know. They did such terrible things. But I don't know if the generals were the ones that did it, or the kind of.
Well, the generals gave the orders a lot of times.
Well, not the way. Well, some of it, but I don't think the cruelty. I think that was just within the people. That was the nature of some people. If you give them the power, they're under difficult circumstances, they may do things like that.
And what did you think of the atomic bombs?
Well, at that time, I was in favor of dropping them to end the war. Now, they had been warned. They had been warned before before Hiroshima, and they'd been warned before Nagasaki, and each time they refused. So you really have to blame the emperor and the high-ranking people in the country for.
So you believe it was the right thing to do?
Absolutely. Now, I know in retrospect, nowadays, it's considered probably should not have been done,
But then it seemed like the best way to end the war.
Absolutely, and that's what everybody wanted to do, end the war.
All right, Grandma. Well, thank you for your quick interview.
You're welcome, my dear. You're very welcome.
This has been an interview with Claire Sherman. Thank you for watching. So, what did you feel about the atomic bombs?
Well, as I said up there, I think it was the best thing that we could have done, because the Japanese said they would fight to the last man, and they found afterwards, 4 years later, 5, 6, 7 years later, there were Japanese still in caves that were found because they didn't know the war was over.
Were they hiding, or were they soldiers ready to attack?
They were hiding, I guess, because I was so surprised. They couldn't be convinced until some of the armed forces brought their own people down in there to let them know that the war was over.
Who were these citizens, or
What's that?
who were the people hiding?
The Japanese soldiers.
Oh, soldiers. Okay.
Yeah, they were still hiding in some of these caves and stuff. And
Were they hiding from the bombs or just from the war?
well, they were hiding from the people, the American people, or the Germans, or whoever they were we're fighting against. They're the France and what you call it, because they were ordered to fight to the death.
And they didn't want to die, and they didn't want to kill them.
No, they just were waiting to find somebody. They looked around, probably went out a dozen times, couldn't find somebody, and came back.
Were these in Japan or in America? Or in some?
No,
or
I guess they're on some of the islands.
some of the islands.
Yeah,
Okay.
some of the islands.
Just
were-
waiting for orders.
Yeah.
What do you think of that man who was in the Philippines for 30 years?
I think he wasted a good life.
Yeah, he wrote a book about it. So you think the atomic bomb was necessary?
It was absolutely necessary. It saved thousands of Americans' lives, and I don't know how many Japanese lives. Because you could tell by the first bomb they dropped, they would not give up. It took 2 bombs for them to give up. So can you imagine if you didn't have the bombs, how long they would have been fighting? Probably another 3-4 years.
Probably. I don't know how it would have ended then.
So I don't see anything. I think it's the best thing we did.
Even in retrospect?
Yes, even in retrospect. Because it did stop the war.
All right, Grandpa.
And that's the way it is.
So it is said, so it shall be done.
Whatever must be, must be.